for coming today, for joining us in another of our warm up to topical session. Today's session is entitled, Do You Think You Might Like to Try a Thematic Exhibit? And our presenter today is our very own Dawn Hamman. Dawn is the president of the American Topical Association, and she started exhibiting in 2012 and has made 11 exhibits since then, including two of my favorites, Backyard Chickens and Abraham Lincoln's Life and Legacy. She is now working on several new ones. In 2014, she won the Mary Ann Owens One Frame Grand Award. And in 2019, the Multi-Frame Reserve Grand at the National Topical Stamp Show. I also know she's won the most popular exhibit a time or two as well. So I'm looking forward to everything that she has to say. A very good teacher for this subject. Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you, Jennifer. Nice to see everybody. It's wonderful that we can get together this way. I want to alert you before we start a program coming up on Tuesday evening with Charlene Blair, who I think is here in our audience today. Extraordinary, Ordinary Black Women on U.S. Postage Stamps. This is our celebration of Black History Month, so please register if you haven't already done so and join us on Tuesday. If you are attending this program and you've been enjoying our programs and you're not yet an ATA member, I'd like to invite you to join. We're kind of like PBS. You can watch us for free, but we sure do appreciate if you also support us. I promise you that you won't be disappointed in an ATA membership. You could enjoy our wonderful award-winning journal, our world-class topical checklist, and lots of other things. So please give it some thought and go on our website and join. And now I'm going to share screen. Okay, we're just going to scratch the surface here today. I noticed in this audience that there are some people who are more experienced, talented exhibitors than I am. And I want you to know that a lot of the things I'm going to say are my opinion based on my experience. And if you have other thoughts, we would love for you to share them at the end. Here's what I would like to accomplish. We're going to help you understand what you're seeing when you look at a thematic exhibit at a show. And in the meantime, while we're doing that, we'll be covering some of the very basic steps involved in creating a thematic exhibit. So I'm hoping we can accomplish kind of two things at once here. I need to tell you about my story about how I became an exhibitor. I was not a stamp collector as a child, like many of you. When we retired, we moved to Florida, and my husband, John, who is a lifelong collector, liked to go to Florex, the stamp show in Orlando. And I would tag along just to keep him company in the car. And I would take a book and I'd sit and read a book. And then I'd get bored and I'd start wandering around the stamp show, and I looked at exhibits. And for quite a few shows, I looked at exhibits by this man, Phil Stagg, and they are wonderful. They are clever, they're funny, they're entertaining, they tell a compelling story. I just thought they had it all. And so finally, one show after I'd been doing this for a while, I looked at John and I said, you know, if I could do something like this guy, I think I'd like to be an exhibitor. And the rest is history. I did not become a stamp collector or an exhibitor until I was 65 years old. And I often think, oh, I wish I would have got started on this a long time before that. I was very fortunate that subsequently I was introduced to Phil and he became my mentor. And to this day, he helps me with every single exhibit that I do. And I owe him a lifelong debt of gratitude for what he's done for me. But I guess my message there is it's never too late. For my very first exhibit, I chose the Florida manatee, a topic that I'm very passionate about. I was a volunteer for years for the Save the Manatee Club, and I really care about these beautiful creatures that we have here in Florida. Okay, some basics. Collection is not an exhibit. If you could have the collection of the most wonderful collection of butterflies in the world, thousands of butterflies, but that is not an exhibit. If you want to do an exhibit on butterflies, you're going to need a lot more than just stamps that picture butterflies. Topical is not thematic. A topical collection where you have an accumulation of stamps and other philatelic items that portray an animal or a plant, whatever it is, that's not the same thing as thematic, and we're going to go forward and talk a little bit more about that. The definition is really very simple. A thematic exhibit tells a story about an animal, a plant, an event, a person, something that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. A story, just like every story that we all have ever heard. There are 3 types of exhibits treated thematically, and these are the types of exhibits that we admit in the National Topical Stamp Show category for our exhibits. The first is a traditional thematic exhibit, which uses only philatelic items. Hopefully a wide variety of philatelic items, stamps, souvenirs, sheets, meters, you name it, all the things that we can find that portray our topic and things associated with our topic. It uses philatelic items to tell a non-philatelic story. That's important. The story is non-philatelic. If you say this exhibit is about XYZ 1915 issue green stamp, that's not thematic. Here's a thematic exhibit, League of Nations, by Fran Adams, who's the prince of one frame exhibits. He's won many, many fine awards. You can see on this page that everything here is philatelic. I think Jean's with us today. This is Jean Wang's exhibit, Blood, a Modern Medicine. This is one of the finest pure thematic exhibits that has ever been done. You can glance around this page and see, besides the fact that she's got loads of wonderful things on this page, that everything on the page is thematic. The second type of thematic exhibit is a display exhibit. It tells a non-philatelic story, once again, same thing, using a wide variety of philatelic items, all the things we mentioned before and a lot more, and other non-philatelic items. These can be photos, maps, ephemera, campaign ribbons, programs, recipes, all kinds of things that you can find, usually paper, but not always. Larry Davidson's exhibit on beavers, he has a piece of a beaver pelt in the exhibit. My backyard chickens exhibit, I have an eggshell from a chicken that lays green eggs. So you can have a lot of fun with this kind of exhibit. Display exhibits today are by far the most popular thematic exhibit that is being done. I think there are a few reasons for that. The first would be that they probably usually are a little bit easier because you have a wider array of items to choose from to tell your story. Secondly, it's a lot of fun to find that oddball pieces of ephemera, postcards, all kinds of things that you can put in this kind of an exhibit. And thirdly, this sort of an exhibit is a little bit cheaper in general terms to put together because you can buy pieces of ephemera that run $2–3, and you can help tell your story with things where you're not spending very much money. This is my backyard chickens. You can see I've got a booklet stamp up above, a picture postcard down below, and in the middle is a business card for a company that can teach you and give you a degree in advanced chicken keeping. This is Larry Davidson's Beaver Exhibit. In the middle on the left is a Brook Bond tea card, collectible type of card that was included in a package of tea. And on the bottom is a telephone card. And I have used these in my exhibits. You can find them with all kinds of different pictures. The third type of thematic exhibit would be a picture postcard exhibit treated thematically. In other words, using postcards to tell a story. A picture postcard exhibit uses generally only, you can use some collateral material, but primarily picture postcards. And it's the image, the picture on the postcard that counts on this type of an exhibit, not where it was mailed from or any of the philatelic information. A picture postcard exhibit does not generally use much philatelic information. It uses deltiological information, which is information about the publisher, the printing method, and so forth. I like this kind of an exhibit because a lot of things regarding picture postcards have not been documented. And so you can do a lot of original research with this kind of exhibit. Barry Stagg is with us today. This is his parachuting postcard exhibit. Barry is president of the British Thematic Association. We have lots of friends over in the UK, and we were lucky to have Barry come and speak at the National Topical Stamp Show a few years ago. And we've been trying to get him back, and I think maybe it was going to happen this past year and maybe next time. This is my exhibit on Abraham Lincoln. This is also a postcard exhibit, of course. I just wanted to point out to you on the right-hand side, the plan, which takes us through Abraham Lincoln's life. And I don't know if you can read it there. I can barely make it out, but basically it goes all the way through his life. We'll be talking more about the plan, and it's helpful to see that this was in chronological order. Rules. I have people tell me all the time, I don't think I could do an exhibit. There's just too many rules. I couldn't learn those rules. I couldn't follow those rules. It's just too complicated. Well, I want you, if you're that person, I want you to go on the APS website and download the Manual of Philatelic Judging and Exhibiting. And look up thematic exhibits in there, and you will see that there really aren't very many rules, maybe two. We are going to talk about some conventions, some things that many people do to do exhibits that are attractive and successful. But as for the basic rules, it's not much. But I will tell you that if you are thinking of doing an exhibit, or even if you just want to understand more about exhibiting, this is a wonderful thing to read. It's very well written. It's simple. You can understand it. You will understand it, even if you have very little experience with philately. And of course, I'm not a bit biased, but I want to recommend to you this book available from ATA, which has pretty much step-by-step instructions on how to do a thematic exhibit. It has a lot of extra things. It has some articles by high award-winning exhibitors. It has lots of pictures of exhibit pages. It has a whole section on how to choose paper for your exhibit, on and on. You really could do a thematic exhibit following the instructions in this book. You're probably going to want to have some help from people and other sources, but this is the best place to get started. But what is my theme for my exhibit going to be? How do I choose? Lots of different ways people decide what to choose. Chances are many of you in our session today already have in mind a theme for your exhibit. Think of something that you're passionately interested in. These are the important things. You want to pick a subject that you are going to be interested in and want to study for a long, long time. I remember when I started, someone told me, buy enough paper to last you for 20 years because you're going to be revising that exhibit for 20 years. And I said to him, oh no, I'm done with that exhibit now. Well, I was very wrong. We all exhibitors revise. You find new things. A judge or someone else gives you a suggestion that you think is very valuable. And so you're off again, revising. For a long time, when I was at the beginning, I would revise every exhibit every time I showed it. I showed you my example of the manatee that I did at the very beginning, and I made a few mistakes, and they come up right here. You want to be sure there's enough philatelic material to develop your theme. In the case of the manatee, there are not very many stamps, not very many other things that are philatelic that I can collect. But even more so, most of the manatee stamps are newer stamps. A lot of them are stamps issued by countries that only issue stamps for stamp collectors. You know what I'm talking about. And so to achieve rarity, to find unusual things is very difficult with this particular topic. Also, when you start, if you have a certain number of frames in mind, you need to consider whether you can find the appropriate number of items for the frames that you want to do. You might choose a subject related to your education, your career, your hobby. People commonly do this. Jack Congrove's exhibit on Alexander Hamilton certainly got started with his intense interest in American history, but also he was in the military for his career. And so this was a really nice fit for Jack. Another thing you'll want to do when you're considering a subject is look at an American Topical Association checklist. You're probably all familiar with these. They have the country, the date of issue, the denomination, the Scott number, and a description of what's on the stamp. First off, you're going to look at how many stamps there are for your topic that you've chosen. If it's 12, you might have a problem. In this case, I'm doing an exhibit called How the Banana Became America's Favorite Fruit, and there's 374 stamps, so that's pretty good. If you have a topic that has 10,000 stamps, you might have a problem there too, because you are going to have a hard time limiting the scope of your exhibit. You want to look at, besides the number of stamps, the issuing countries. Again, if your topic is an animal that lives in Europe, there are a lot of stamps picturing that animal from those very countries, or are they from those countries that issue stamps for collectors? You also want to look at the date of issue. You want to have some new stamps, some old stamps, plenty of stamps that go back so that, again, you can achieve some rarity. Here's a good one to do. Pick an animal. There's a lot of conventions that you can use that people typically do where you can't go wrong with an animal. Its evolution, where it lives, how it lives, its anatomy and physiology, what it eats, its predators, mating, mortality, its relationship to humans can be very interesting. And the part that I always like when I get to this section is how the animal is portrayed in art, music, literature, folklore, tradition, lots of different interesting things you can find for literally any animal that you might be interested in. Here's another convention that works really well and for a few reasons. The how-to type of exhibit. Build a boat, bake a pie, make wine, train a dog. In my case, I did how to grow tomatoes. We're going to talk about developing the plan. And for me, that is the hardest part by far of doing an exhibit. But if you do a how-to, your plan is kind of built in for you. In other words, how you get started, what you're going to need for your tomatoes, choose what kind of tomatoes you're going to plant, actually planting them, what happens then as far as water and sunlight and so forth, controlling weeds and pests, and finally enjoying those big, beautiful red ripe tomatoes. So anything you do that's a how-to, your plan is going to be pretty straightforward, which particularly when you're beginning is pretty nice. In this case, I sort of stumbled on a topic that I chose for an exhibit. We were in Portland, I can't remember how many years ago now, at the National Topical Stamp Show, and we went in a used bookstore, and I found this book, a first edition of a book about bellflowers. I was attracted by how beautiful they were, but I thought, you know, that's not a well-known flower. I think maybe I could do a little one-frame exhibit on that. So I bought the book, and I had a wonderful time doing the exhibit. Campanulas are more common in Europe than they are in the United States. I don't know if Larry Davidson is with us today, but he lives in Canada, and he sent me pictures of campanulas in bloom in his neighborhood. I was able to, like Tom and Michelle, find campanulas from other countries where the name is a little different. In England, it's a harebell. And so I had to learn what this particular flower was called in different countries. And again, as with the animal, your plan kind of writes itself. You've got to tell about the scientific classification, where you find the plant, the history, the different species, symbolism, music, art, and so forth. So this is fairly straightforward and a really fun type of exhibit to find the items. Okay, now we'll get to the plan. And this, like I said, if anything gets my blood pressure up, this is what does it. The rules don't say you have to have a plan, but you really have to have a plan. The plan has to be a logical sequence for your storyline that reflects the title. It's logical, it's balanced, it shows how your story will progress. And it kind of goes without saying, it needs to make sense. So I'll tell you a little story about a recent exhibit of mine. I have a postcard exhibit about a man called Edwin Costin. Back at the turn of the 20th century, women were crazy for ostrich feathers. Everybody wore great big hats, and they had to have a big ostrich plume. Well, it was a problem in the United States because ostrich feathers were very expensive because they had to come from South Africa. So this man, Edwin Costin, an entrepreneur, got an idea. He chartered a ship. He went to South Africa. He brought back 32 ostriches to California. I think there were only 18 still alive by the time he got there. Anyway, he was able to raise them and breed them. And he sold directly to women who came to his farm to buy their ostrich feathers. And he could sell them cheaply because he cut out the middleman and because he had his own ostriches. So he became quite successful, and he found out that people came to his ostrich farm and wanted to watch the ostriches. So lo and behold, a tourist attraction was formed, and eventually the Costin Ostrich Farm was the #1 tourist attraction in California. Well, I was in love with the title that I had for my exhibit. When ostrich plumes were all the rage. And so I did that exhibit and I put it in a show, and the judge said to me, well, that's not really the story you're telling. The story you're telling is about this entrepreneur that was successful in raising ostriches and selling ostrich feathers. And I was in love with that title that I had. I really didn't want to change it. But, you know, the more you think about it, it's not really about ostrich feathers. It's about what this man did. So I redid the exhibit, and now it's named, He Built an Empire with Ostrich Feathers. And it's much better because it's the story of Edwin Costin. So we can sometimes think when we are coming up with an idea for an exhibit that we have the plan, the idea in mind, but very often it's a good idea to get someone else to look at the order that you're planning to tell your story. And you maybe are too close sometimes, I guess. And you might be very helpful to have another person look at it, and set it aside and give it a little time and so forth. But the fact that we think everything we do is logical, not always the case. Here's a nice exhibit by Wendy Buckle, who is from the UK. She's an expert on paper. And this is an example of a wonderful plan. She takes us through the chronology from the time before we actually had paper to the very first paper, all the way through the decades, clear down to the present where recycling has become a necessity. This is a thematic exhibit, wonderfully organized, and she really knows her topic. This is an exhibit of mine, which I put in here to show you that the plan can really be very simple. I broke one of my rules when I did this exhibit. I did this exhibit as a challenge because there is only one stamp that actually shows vinegar. And I wanted to prove I could tell the story with only one stamp and all the other collateral material that I could use. But you can see that the plan is very, very simple. This is only a one-frame exhibit. How do you come up with your plan? There are some tricks that make it easier for you to develop your plan. One would be to look at a Wikipedia article for your topic. You know how the Wikipedia has the outline at the beginning of what's going to be in that article? Sometimes that's pretty much what you need to have for your plan. I'd sure look there first because it's easy. Another thing you can do is get a book about whatever subject you wanted to discuss and see if the index to the book could be used. I'm playing around with doing an exhibit on mustard, and I bought this book, and it has a pretty nice outline on the index that I think I could use. We're not going to get to very much in the way of how to put your exhibit together. That's a whole nother thing. But there is one convention not a rule, a convention that seems to be very helpful, and all the people whose exhibits we're seeing today have followed this. Place your thematic text, your story line, your non-philatelic story on top of the item on the exhibit page in one font, one type size, and do the philatelic description about the item in a different font or in a smaller font. I usually use the next size down of the font and put it in italics. And we'll look at some examples. Here I am back with my vinegar exhibit. And you can see all the way across that page that I have put my storyline at the top and my philatelic description below. I like, when I'm starting an exhibit, to make a little cheat sheet. And this is particularly useful as you begin to do revisions, which might be 2 months or 10 months down the road. I put the type, style, and font sizes for all of the different elements in the exhibit. In other words, my main titles, my subtitles, my body text for my non-philatelic story, my philatelic description. I use a little bit of color in most of my exhibits, and I always am sure to specify what color I use so I can match it the next time. I didn't come up with this idea. Somebody suggested it to me, and I have found it invaluable. You can see here how I've carried over my my plan at the top of the page. This is not ideal when you have to go from one section to the next section on one page. It's sometimes works out that you can end a section on a page and start the new section and the next page, but you're not always so lucky, and that was the case here. You'll see the number 2, popular types of vinegar, is in a lighter shade of green than the history. And the reason for that is that the number 2 is the second or third page where I've discussed that section. And so I want to show that that is a continuing section. And then when I start my new section, I'm going back to my original dark green color. And again, you can see the descriptions, the non-philatelic description across the top. Put the stuff close, and it makes it real easy to look at that exhibit. There's a lot of discussion about title pages, and there are a few things that I would recommend. Think about when you're at a show and you're just wandering down the aisles of exhibits. What makes you stop? Well, you'd stop for both of these, wouldn't you? There's no question what the subject matter is of these 2 exhibits. Nice and big, grabs your attention, makes you want to look into the exhibit. This is the beginning of my vinegar exhibit. On the title page, I have the title of the exhibit, and I have found that it's safer to not try and be too clever, just say it what it is. The purpose of this exhibit is to X, Y, Z. And if you state that explicitly, and then you have your plan and you go through the exhibit explicitly with that plan, you're a long way down the road toward having a good exhibit. I used to try and get clever or cute or whatever in this, and I just quit that. I say the purpose of this exhibit is, and state it. And if you make a direct statement like this, and then you actually do it, what you say you're going to do in an exhibit, that's really today what judges are looking for. You need to end your exhibit in a logical way. We said you need to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. In this case, this is the ostrich exhibit. Mr. Costin's ostrich farm went into decline because around 1915, the Gibson girl hairstyle came in, and you can see what that looks like. You're not going to put a big hat with an ostrich plume on top of that hairdo. So guess what? We don't need ostrich feathers anymore. That makes a really good epilogue. It is somewhat in fashion now for exhibiting to use the word epilogue and actually come up with an ending that makes sense. This sometimes can be hard. Sometimes, as in this case, it's pretty obvious what you need to do. Finally, I know lots of people that have wonderful collections, and they've been talking for years about doing an exhibit. I read a couple of weeks ago an article in the New Yorker magazine, and it's called, "Is It Really Too Late to Learn New Skills?" Some of you are young, but this article was written for those of us who are in our senior years. And the thing that really hit home to me in this article was it said, older people are used to the fact that they can do most of the things that they do well or very well because they've been doing them for a long time and they have a lot of experience. So here we are talking about possibly doing something that you have never done before. You're not real sure how to do it. You have terrific fear of failure. People say to me, "Oh, I'll put it in and I'll get a silver bronze." Well, so what? You know, we go to these stamp shows and we see these experienced exhibitors who are winning all these high awards. They started somewhere. A lot of them started 40 years ago. And for those of us who started just recently, you have to start somewhere. And I'll tell you that if you start and you get a silver medal, that's really a good place to start. That means you follow the steps that I just went through and you were successful. That is a successful start. Also, I would recommend to you something that happened to me and probably to some of the people here who are already exhibitors, is that if you get a silver the first time, you listen to the judges, you make some changes, you find new items, you're learning every step of the way. You get that silver the first time, the second time you get a vermeil. Then you get a large vermeil, and lo and behold, the day comes when you do get a gold. And that's a lot more fun than coming right out of the gate and getting a gold. I really recommend it to you. Let's talk a little bit about judges. The newcomers, people contemplating exhibiting, are afraid of judges. This particular judge is Liz Heisey. She's a very talented thematic exhibitor and judge with a lot of thematic expertise. Judges, on the whole, not 100%, but on the whole, are very kind people. They care a lot about what they're doing. They give your exhibit a lot of thought. I make it a habit to meet with the judges at my exhibit right at the frames. I have my notebook there. I take notes. A lot of times a judge will come up with an idea for you, a suggestion of a revision to make or something. And you go, "Why didn't I think of that?" Of course, that's what I should do. And then you make that change. Other times, a judge might make a suggestion and you think, I don't know, I think maybe I might know more about this than you do because I've spent a lot of time with it. In that case, I wouldn't make a revision. I'd wait until I hear maybe that same comment from a judge the next time, or maybe it never comes up again. So you just kind of have to use your own common sense. Finally, a quote from my buddy Phil Stagg. I remember way back saying to him, I don't know about this exhibit. I don't know if I should enter this. I've just got reservations. And he said to me, just put it out there and see what they say. And now every single time when I'm working on an exhibit, I think, oh, I don't have this quite right, but I can't think of any way to make it better. I'm just going to put it out there and see what they say. So please remember that, because what's the worst thing that could happen? You get a medal level that isn't maybe as high as you would like. There's always next time. And lastly, I hope that you will have fun with this. Many of us have had stressful, high pressure careers. We had them before we retired. And you don't want to make exhibiting that. You want to make it fun. You want to make it exciting. So I encourage you to try it and do that, and keep that in mind, that it's not a life or death thing, and you can have a lot of fun with it. We were just thrilled at the registration that we had for this talk today. It seems obvious that there are a lot of people thinking about doing thematic exhibits, knowing more about thematic exhibiting. We do already have scheduled for later this year some other programs on thematic exhibiting, some programs by successful exhibitors, and some more how-to type of programs. But in the meantime, I would like to issue an invitation. If there are some people here today who are contemplating working on a thematic exhibit, or maybe more importantly, who already are working on it, I would invite you to send me an email if you would like to be involved in some Zoom forums where we could exchange ideas, kind of the thing that we usually do at shows, but that we haven't had a chance to do lately. We could have say a volunteer leader for the discussion, and we could talk about choosing your theme. We could talk about how to write your synopsis for your exhibit, which is something that we didn't even touch on today. There are all kinds of, we could talk about how to cut mats, lay out pages, really any part of exhibiting that you might want to discuss. People could talk about their theme idea and their plan and go through it and get feedback from the others. So if you're interested in doing that, ATA would be delighted to host that. And just send me an email and we'll get her done. And now let's see, I'm pretty far along here in time, so I am going to stop share, and I'm hoping that some of the exhibitors who are with us will chime in, and we're also very open to questions.
Thank you, Dawn. That was a wonderful presentation. I learned a lot, and I'm ready to go put together an exhibit. That's wonderful.